It is 6 a.m. in the Persian Gulf, and if you are just waking up, I need you to understand something immediately. The war you thought was contained, the war you were told was almost over, has not only widened in the last 18 hours, it has fundamentally changed shape. For the past 3 weeks, we have watched a conflict defined by precision strikes, by strategic posturing, and by political rhetoric from Washington and Tel Aviv. We were told the objectives were clear. We were told the campaign was nearing its end. But if you look at the satellite imagery coming out of the Gulf right now, or listen to the air raid sirens that have not stopped echoing across Tel Aviv, Jerusalem, and Haifa since midnight, you will realize that we have crossed a threshold. We are no longer just watching a war between the United States, Israel, and Iran. We are now watching the unraveling of the global energy order. We are watching a direct confrontation that has dragged in Gulf monarchies, paralyzed the Strait of Hormuz, and pushed the International Atomic Energy Agency to issue warnings that sound more like a prelude to a nuclear accident than a diplomatic note. The dates are 20th March and 21st, 2026. The war is on day 21. And despite Donald Trump telling us just days ago that this would be a 4-week excursion, despite Netanyahu declaring victory, the missiles are still flying, the oil fields are burning, and for the first time in this conflict, we have to ask a terrifying question. Is anyone actually in control anymore? Let's start with what happened while you were sleeping, because the timeline is critical. Just after sunset on 20th March, a day that was supposed to mark the Persian New Year, Nowruz, a time of renewal for Iranians, the Israeli Defense Forces launched a new, significant wave of strikes targeting the heart of Tehran. We are not talking about peripheral military bases this time. The IDF confirmed in a statement that they were targeting infrastructure of the Iranian terror regime across the capital. But here is where the narrative splits and the chaos reveals itself. For the last 2 days, a strange tension has existed between Washington and Jerusalem. On Thursday, Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu held a press conference and did something unusual. He insisted that Israel acted alone in the strike on the South Pass gas field, a massive energy facility, earlier this week. He admitted that President Trump had asked Israel to hold off on attacking energy infrastructure, and yet, Israel proceeded anyway. Netanyahu dismissed claims that he dragged the United States into this, saying, "Does anyone really think anyone can tell President Trump what to do?" He framed himself as the loyal ally, but the message was clear. Israel is setting its own objectives, and they are not aligned with the White House's timeline. And then came the retaliation. Because no sooner had the smoke risen over Tehran than Iran's Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps made good on their promise of zero restraint. Foreign Minister Abbas Araghchi had warned just 24 hours earlier that if Israel touched their infrastructure again, Tehran would respond without limits. They kept that promise. Throughout the night, Iran launched a cascade of missiles and drones not just at Israel, but at the economic lifeblood of America's allies in the Gulf. We have confirmed reports from Kuwait. The Kuwait Petroleum Corporation announced that the Mina Al-Ahmadi refinery, one of the largest in the Middle East, processing over 700,000 barrels a day, was struck by drones. This is the second attack on that facility in 48 hours. Fires erupted across several units. The facility has been partially shut down. This is not collateral damage. This is a strategy. Iran is systematically dismantling the energy security of the Gulf states to punish them for hosting us bases. The United Arab Emirates also came under fire. Al Dhafra Air Base, a critical hub for us F-35s and refueling tankers, was targeted directly by Iranian missiles. State media in the UAE confirmed they were responding to incoming threats, but earlier in the day, Emirati authorities had dropped a bombshell of their own, announcing the arrest of at least 5 members of a terrorist network linked to Iran and Hezbollah. The network, according to UAE state media, was trying to infiltrate the national economy and destabilize the country from within. Hezbollah, for its part, denied the accusations, calling them fabricated, but the arrests signal that Iran's long arm is reaching deep into the Arabian Peninsula, threatening the very stability of the monarchies that have tried to stay out of the direct line of fire. Meanwhile, Saudi Arabia intercepted drones heading toward its oil-rich eastern region. Bahrain reported that shrapnel from Iranian aggression caused a warehouse fire. Let's pause here for a moment and talk about the Strait of Hormuz, because this is where the global implications become truly terrifying. We are now at a point where nearly 20% of the world's oil supply, and a significant percentage of its liquefied natural gas, is effectively being held hostage. The Iranians have made it clear. If they cannot export, no one in the Gulf will. The US military has reportedly lost approximately 12 MQ-9 Reaper drones since this conflict began. But the most significant military development came earlier this week, and it haunts the events of the last 2 days. An American F-35 fighter jet was forced to make an emergency landing after a combat mission over Iran. While CENTCOM says the incident is under investigation, Iranian media claims they hit it. CNN, citing anonymous sources, reported the plane was likely hit by Iran. If confirmed, this would be a watershed moment. The F-35 is the crown jewel of American stealth technology. For 2 decades, it was considered untouchable. To have one forced down, even if it landed safely, by Iranian air defenses changes the calculus of air superiority in the region. And now, because of the strikes on the refineries in Kuwait and the ongoing blockade of the strait, oil prices are spiking again. Brent crude briefly surged to $108 a barrel. But more concerning than the price is the supply chain. The attack on Qatar's Ras Laffan industrial city earlier this week, an attack Netanyahu claimed Israel did not coordinate with the US on, has disrupted 17% of the world's LNG export capacity. That damage is not easily fixed. This is why you are seeing a scramble in Western capitals. On 20th March, French President Emmanuel Macron announced that France is eyeing a framework to secure navigation in the Strait of Hormuz once the exchange of fire ends. But when will the exchange of fire end? Donald Trump, in his characteristic style, is trying to have it both ways. On the one hand, he is declaring victory. He told reporters on Thursday that the war is almost over and that the US has achieved its objectives. He reiterated that he is not putting troops anywhere, dismissing reports that the administration is considering plans to seize or blockade Kharag Island, the island that handles 90% of Iran's oil exports. But here is the contradiction that no one is talking about enough. While Trump says he is not sending troops, the administration is considering lifting sanctions on Iranian oil. Think about that. We are 3 weeks into a war that started, ostensibly, to prevent Iran from getting a nuclear weapon and to stop its aggression. And now, because the price of gas is hurting American voters and European allies, the US is contemplating allowing Iranian oil to flow again. Treasury Secretary Scott Bessent said Thursday that the US could soon lift sanctions on Iranian oil carried on tankers at sea. Energy Secretary Chris Wright added that if the sanctions are lifted, the oil could reach Asian markets within 3 or 4 days. What does this say to Tehran? It says that the United States is willing to trade economic relief for a temporary ceasefire. It says that the maximum pressure campaign that defined the last decade is now being swapped for a maximum pragmatism strategy. And if you are Mojtaba Khamenei, the new supreme leader of Iran who inherited this war after the death of his father, what do you see? You see an America that is militarily exhausted and economically anxious. Mojtaba Khamenei is not his father. The old supreme leader was a cautious cleric who weighed every move against the survival of the regime. But Mojtaba, in his Nowruz message on Friday, he declared this the year of the resistance economy and claimed that the war has created a strange unity among Iranians. He said the US and Israel expected the regime to collapse after the initial strikes. He said they miscalculated. And looking at the last 24 hours, with Iran striking Gulf refineries with impunity and surviving waves of Israeli bombing over Tehran, he might be right. But the unity in Iran is not necessarily unity behind the regime. We also saw a message from Reza Pahlavi, the son of the deposed Shah, who used Nowruz to call for a free and prosperous Iran. The opposition is watching. They see a regime under unprecedented military pressure. They see a leadership that just lost its founder. They see an opportunity. Netanyahu, for his part, is counting on this internal pressure. He said on Friday that the regime has been decimated and no longer has the capacity to enrich uranium or produce ballistic missiles. But he also admitted that to actually trigger a revolution, a ground component would be necessary. And that brings us back to the United States and the specter of ground troops. Despite Trump's denials, the reports are persistent. Axios reported, citing anonymous sources, that the administration is considering plans to seize Kharag Island to force the strait open. Senate Intelligence Committee Chairman Tom Cotton praised Trump for not ruling out a ground invasion, saying the president has whole mountains of plans. And let's not forget the wider region. On 20th March, the Houthis in Yemen issued a new warning. Their spokesman, Yahya Sarria, said that if the US joins Israel in attacking Iran, they will target American warships in the Red Sea. We have seen this movie before. In 2024, the Houthis shut down the Red Sea for months, attacking commercial shipping. If they re-enter the fray now, at a time when the Strait of Hormuz is already effectively closed, the global shipping industry will face a crisis unlike anything we have seen since the pandemic. It will not just be oil prices, it will be the cost of everything that moves by sea. Meanwhile, in the Levant, the war is expanding. The IDF announced that they have expanded ground operations in southern Lebanon, striking over 2,000 Hezbollah targets. They claim to have killed over 570 Hezbollah fighters. But these operations are no longer contained to the border. They are spilling over into Lebanon's interior. NATO has temporarily withdrawn its mission from Iraq. Citing security risks, the alliance pulled out personnel as attacks on foreign-linked sites intensified. When NATO pulls out of a country, it is not a sign of a conflict winding down. It is a sign that they believe the situation is about to get significantly worse. Let's look at the human toll, because in the noise of geopolitics and oil markets, we cannot forget that real people are dying. Iranian health authorities report that at least 1,444 people have been killed inside Iran since the start of the conflict, with over 18,500 wounded. On the US side, at least 13 service members have been killed. And these numbers are likely to rise dramatically as the targeting shifts from purely military assets to energy infrastructure. When you hit a refinery, whether in Kuwait, Iran, or Qatar, you are not just hitting a building. You are creating environmental disasters. You are putting workers in harm's way. You are creating a secondary humanitarian crisis that will last long after the bombs stop falling. The United Nations Secretary-General Antonio Guterres issued a stark warning on Thursday. He said there are reasonable grounds to believe that both sides in this conflict may have committed war crimes, as attacks on energy facilities intensify. Politico reported on this, noting that the UN is deeply concerned about the proportionality of the strikes and the targeting of civilian infrastructure. The IAEA is also terrified. Iran has formally urged the agency to condemn Israel's intentional attack on the Bushehr nuclear plant. The attack occurred just 200 meters from the reactor. This is the third strike near Iranian nuclear facilities in this conflict. The IAEA has called for restraint, but restraint is a luxury no one seems to be able to afford right now. Let's consider the political chessboard. On 20th March, a coalition of 12 Arab and Islamic countries, including Turkey, Saudi Arabia, Egypt, and Pakistan, held a consultative meeting in Riyadh. They issued a joint statement condemning Iran's attacks and reserving the right to defend themselves. They called on Iran to cease all provocations and respect the UN Security Council resolution demanding an end to attacks on Gulf states. This is significant. For years, the Gulf states have tried to de-escalate with Iran. They signed a Beijing brokered deal with Saudi Arabia. They tried to open economic channels. But now, their refineries are burning, and their airspace is a war zone. The window for diplomacy between the Gulf and Tehran is closing rapidly. But even as the Gulf closes ranks against Iran, the transatlantic alliance is showing cracks. Donald Trump lashed out at NATO allies on Truth Social, calling them a paper tiger for refusing to join the war against Iran or help secure the Strait of Hormuz. He accused them of being cowards who benefit from our military action but refuse to contribute. This is a dangerous path. The US is fighting a war in the Middle East, and the president is publicly insulting his allies. It sends a message to Tehran and to Moscow that the Western alliance is fracturing. And Moscow is watching closely. Russia has already condemned the strikes on Bushehr, noting that the attack threatened the lives of Russian personnel working at the site. If Russia decides to get more involved, to provide advanced air defense or electronic warfare capabilities to Iran, this war could spiral into a proxy conflict between nuclear powers. China is also watching. They have formally condemned the strikes as violations of national sovereignty. They have economic interests in Iranian oil and in the stability of the Gulf. The US is now considering lifting sanctions on Iranian oil, which would put American and Chinese tankers in direct competition for the same crude in the middle of a war zone. So, where are we at the close of 20th March, heading into 21st March? We have a situation where Israel is striking deeper into Iran than ever before, hitting energy infrastructure despite American pleas for restraint. We have Iran retaliating by targeting the energy infrastructure of America's Gulf allies, effectively turning the entire Persian Gulf into a fire zone. We have the United States trying to end a war it started 3 weeks ago, even as its own F-35s are being hit and its bases are under fire. We have the Strait of Hormuz, the artery of the global economy, effectively severed. We have oil prices hovering at levels that threaten a global recession. We have NATO withdrawing from Iraq. We have the Houthis threatening the Red Sea. We have the unwarning of war crimes. We have a new, untested supreme leader in Tehran who is doubling down on resistance. We have an Israeli prime minister who is publicly defying the American president. And we have an American president who is declaring victory while simultaneously preparing to lift sanctions on the enemy he promised to destroy. If you are looking for a clean narrative, a clear end to this war, you are not going to find it here. This is not a conflict with a clear beginning and end. This is a fracture. It is the sound of the post-Cold War order finally snapping. As we move into 21st March, the question is no longer who is winning the war. The question is whether anyone has the ability to stop the escalation. The missiles are still in the air. The refineries are still burning. And the clock is ticking toward a confrontation that could pull in every major power in the world. I want to leave you with one final thought. We heard a lot of rhetoric about the axis of resistance collapsing when Ayatollah Khamenei died. We heard that the regime was on its last legs. But what we have seen in the last 48 hours is a regime that, despite losing its leader, its security chief, and dozens of commanders, is still capable of projecting power 1,000 miles across the Persian Gulf to strike a refinery in Kuwait. And we saw US military that, despite its overwhelming technological superiority, is now dealing with damaged F-35s and considering a ground invasion of an island it hasn't even captured yet. There is a theory of victory, and there is a reality of war. Right now, in the Middle East, the gap between those two things is widening into an abyss. This is your world on 21st March 2026. Stay informed. Stay safe. And watch the Strait, because that is where the future of this conflict, and quite possibly the future of the global economy, will be decided. We will be following this throughout the day. For now, I'm signing off.